Welcome to the Transy Sports Network as we commence Hall of Fame Weekend 2017, inducting 5 more than worthy inductees, and one we have the pleasure of talking with right now is a Transy alum in his own right, Dr. Greg White. Dr. White, a contributor, one who's indelibly linked with Transylvania, and someone who's also given back so much to the Lexington community, partnering with hundreds of different organizations and sub-communities within the Bluegrass region. Doctor, it's so great to have you back, and welcome once again to Transylvania.
Thanks, I appreciate that. It's good to be here.
Can you tell us your story a little bit about how the relationship developed between you and Transylvania? It's a long story, but maybe find a good place to begin.
Okay, I will. I'll keep it as brief as possible, but Transy had a humongous impact on my life. In fact, it changed the direction of my life. I grew up in a little town in West Tennessee, one of 4 boys on a farming community, literally 8-10 miles away from the nearest town of 5,000 people. And nobody in my family had ever gone to college. So when it came time for me to make a decision of what to do, I decided I was going to try it. I was going to break out of the mold in a farming community. Nobody ever went, but I really didn't have anyone to guide me in that from a family standpoint. So I took the advice of my preacher and ended up in a little school in Arkansas for a semester. And I soon came to realize that the only people that went to that school became teachers and preachers, and which is fantastic because the world needs a lot more of them, but I was not inclined to go either direction. So I was sitting in a Knoxville dorm room one night with some friends of mine 3 days before the second semester started at Transy, and I knew of Transy because I had a cousin that came here and was still enrolled as a senior that year. So I got up the next morning after spending that evening kind of reflecting on what I was going to do because I knew I had to make a change. So I called the registrar's office at Transy the next morning and asked them if they had a dorm room, and they said yes. And I said, "All right, thanks a lot," and I hung up. And I drove to Arkansas from Knoxville, Tennessee, loaded up my car, stopped off to tell my parents that I was transferring, at which time they replied, "If you're making adult decisions, then you accept adult consequences. You're on your own financially from this point forward," which was a little scary, but things were not going great in farming at that point in time, so I thought I'm pretty much on my own anyway. So I drove to Lexington that night, got up the next morning, and with transcripts in hand, and from that first semester, and walked onto Transy's campus and went to every single door trying to open them. And then they were all locked. Saturday before second semester, cold day in January. So I stood outside for about 30 minutes until I saw this older gentleman walking across, and I stopped him and said, "Can you help me?" And he said, "What are you doing out here in the cold?" And I told him my story. I said, I want to enroll here. I just got my transcripts. So understanding it completely, he said, "Let me just make sure I've got this right. You want to enroll here. You have no money. You have no. You made no preparations for this. And what exactly did you think you were going to get here?" And I said, "Sir, I have no idea what I expected, but all I know is I've got my transcripts. I've got $23 in my pocket, and I've got a half tank of gas. I can't even get back home. So I just need help." Well, it turns out that fellow's name was Dr. Monroe Musnick, who was the head of the science department at Transy at that time. And he was on his way over to Forer Hall to meet with some transfers that were coming in. He was going to be their advisor. So he grabbed me by the arm, took me over there, and I became his advisee and enrolled 100%. Trying on borrowed money, just trying to get through the semester. At the end of that semester, Dr. Musnick and I had developed a good little relationship. We would meet at Stella's over here on Jefferson Street and have lunch every Wednesday. So I stopped by his office and told him that I wasn't going to be able to come back, that my parents had separated, my father's business was going under, the farm was, and he was filing bankruptcy, and I wasn't going to have any money. I'd borrowed everything I possibly could. And Dr. Musnick said, "Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Just make sure you check your mailbox before you leave tomorrow." And I said, "I will." So as I was pulling out of the back circle behind Forer Hall that day, I remembered what he'd said, and I stopped the car and I went in, to the little post office area there in the back of 4 and checked my mailbox, and inside was a letter indicating that I had a full Thomas Jefferson scholarship for the rest of my career. So the point of this story is not only is it obvious that it changed the direction of the course of my life, but secondly, it shows you how one individual who just takes an interest in someone else can impact someone's lives, and then through them can impact so many others. So Transylvania has given so much to me, and while I had so little impact on Transy while I was here, it had enormous impact on me in my life.
You're one of, there's a lot over this, multi-century wide existence of Transylvania success stories, but yours is still one that manages to rise to the top. And I think when a lot of people think of Lexington, you're one of those great success stories that comes to mind. But why is it so important for you, despite the obvious close connection between you and Lexington, you and Transylvania, why do you find it still so important to be involved with your community?
Well, community is everything. At the end of the day, the only thing that matters in anything you do are the relationships that you establish. For all of the chasing of goals and chasing money and chasing material things, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters are the relationships and the people that you impact. I have found that for all of the books that have been written about money and all of the shows that are on cable TV and satellite about money, I have 3 observations about it. Number 1, money is fun to earn. Secondly, it's fun to spend. But most importantly, it is really fun to give away. So I would say that if you ever want to live a rich life, then give away as much as you possibly can, because that's what will bring joy and happiness to you.
Speaking of joy and happiness, what kind of joy and happiness and perhaps memories that flow through your mind as you come back to Transylvania this weekend and kind of soak in everything you've witnessed of your legacy, and also what's changed since you were last here?
The facilities are much nicer, obviously. It still has the same feel, though. I just remember the closeness that you get. People talk about smaller schools, and a lot of times they'll talk about it with a negative connotation, but I find that when you're in a smaller school, you get to know everyone. So the volume of people and the depth of those relationships that can be created are unmatched by larger universities. I loved my time here. I love the people that I got to meet. I'm still great friends with some of them. And I take a look at some of the folks that graduated in the years right around me throughout Central Kentucky. Many of them still live here. And I think of the impact that they have had on this community, the jobs that they have created, the philanthropies that have succeeded and thrived because of them. And I think a whole lot of that is really a direct result of those relationships and those foundational beliefs that they got while they were here at Transy.
Well, Dr. Greg White, it's such a pleasure to have you in this room and to have you back at Transylvania this weekend. I feel like we just really scraped the minimal surface of all the great stories you have and wisdom and insight to offer. Congratulations again on this massive accolade, and we hope you enjoy your time back here at Transylvania this weekend.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.